Good morning, everybody. Man, this is a big room. Okay, so today I'm going to be speaking about the first-time user experience, or FTUE. This is something I think is very important when launching a game, something that all our games have, and it's something that I've worked on the last few projects I've been on and been a part of. And yeah, I thought this would be a great talking. Who am I? So I'm Eric Santana. I've been in the game industry for about 15 years now. Little kind of apologies on the picture. It's a little bit of an older picture. I took advantage of the free headshots. And so I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I like the story how I entered the game industry. Actually, about my second year of college, in the Art Institute for a lot of for game art and design, I kind of fell in love with pixel art and pixel animation, and kind of self-taught myself pixel art and pixel animation because the school I was going to, they didn't teach pixel art. It was all about 3D Studio Max. And I went to the head of the game art board and tried to kind of pitch we should have classes, curriculum, pixel art, pixel animation. He wasn't having it, didn't believe in it. And luckily enough, that week actually we had a company come to the college looking for graduates who knew pixel art, pixel animation, and no one did. And I kind of was like the only name he had. And I hooked up with them and did an art test, and I got to work on a Dragon Ball Z for the Game Boy Advance, my first project. I was super excited as a college student. It actually was Dragon Ball GT. I tell everybody it was Dragon Ball Z anyway, because reasons. Yeah, so I was super excited. So I started off as an artist and animator. I've worn a lot of different hats. I've been a producer. I've been a designer, currently a designer. Excuse me. A lot of different companies. I've been what the project needed to be to provide the project success, and I kind of enjoy that. I don't like really being like just a cog in the wheel. I try to help out as much as I can where I can, and my favorite thing to do is design, because I enjoy working on the player's experience. I like that perspective, seeing what the player will enjoy and really designing towards that. So one of the reasons why I'm also talking about the first-time user experience. But yeah, it's probably what I enjoy most about working in the game industry. Currently working at Dawn in Auckland, beautiful Auckland. I've been there almost 2 years now. It's been great. Before that, I was at Jam City in California, at their headquarters there, and then a few different other, or all around America, really. Yeah. So what is FTUE, or first-time user experience? So the initial experience of a player when first entering the game. So in layman's terms, it's just the game's first impression. A lot of people will sometimes confuse like tutorial with FTUE, and they're not really the same thing. For FTUE, really is everything. It encompasses everything. So I write like loading screens, menus, could be like the cutscenes, the story, the tutorials inside them. They all kind of encompass that. The initial levels the player goes through. All of it is really the first time user experience. Anything the player experiences when they first enter your game, that's going to be the FTUE. Every game is going to have a FTUE, whether you plan for it or not. So it's best to plan for it. Yeah, even like if once you start playing and it says this is going to take 20 gigs to load, and you need like an hour to download, like that's part of the FTUE. So you have to think about all that stuff. Yeah, so what the experience will determine if the player will return or not. You've probably all heard the expression, you only have one time to make a first impression, and this is really it. So, and this will directly result to your D1 retention. If they like your game, they'll return the next day if they had a good experience, and if they were able to get into your game, which is really important. So I've broken into 3 different sections. So the first thing I want to talk about is just game pacing. So just an introduction to the content of the game to the player and how that's introduced. The second thing I want to talk about is the core loop and teaching the core loop to the player, because that's a very important thing to make sure you do in the first time user experience. And then optimizing, of course, optimizing the FTUE to increase your game's KPIs, which is to reduce churn, to increase D1 retention, D3 as well, and then looking at like funnels and making sure the drop off isn't too steep. So yeah, the first thing, game pacing. So keeping the player engaged. So I write, so using moments of interest to keep the player engaged. Moments of interest or points of interest. I have this illustration on the right here, a YouTube illustration, because they do a pretty good job with this, of having 5 seconds to kind of get your attention and want you to keep invested in that video. So it's really important to follow something like this, where you experience excitement or a cool event, and then kind of a cool down, and then another cool event. Not really just really cool, interesting events, but kind of like a little roller coaster, kind of starting a pie with a really cool intro that really grabs your attention, and then kind of segueing into other parts of the game. So like breaking up storytelling with interactive sections is a good example of that. So if you have like a big cinematic or a big story, and then having a part where it changes up, and maybe they have to interact with it, kind of keeps them interested and keeping the pacing a little dynamic. Bite-sized sections to feed the player. So with pacing, it's super important to not overload the player with too much. So that's going to be a big thing with pacing, not having all the features unlocked, or even the introduction saying having to tell the player that they're going to unlock features, not having that overload them too much. And I'll have an example of that later on. So I find creating a storyboard for these scenes, the intent to make the player experience to be helpful. These top screens are from game Mana Monsters that I'm working on currently at Outer Dawn. These are finished screens. These are actually screens from the game. But once I create these storyboards, and this is kind of my background as an artist, kind of helps me. I tend to make a lot of different mocks. I'll include like the loading screens. I'll include everything I think the game is going to have, and this will really help me just kind of seeing the pacing of how everything is laid out. I'll see if there's like too much dialogue, or just blocks of dialogue, or even like loading screens is helpful to consider here, because talking to tech, we can see when we're going to load a lot of the content to the player, and kind of plan for that at this stage is extremely helpful. Yeah. So I talk about this using points of interest to keep player engaged. I mentioned the cinematic. So this is an example from Grim Tactics, another game we're working on at Outer Dawn. The game is great. We just have it in soft launch now. I encourage everyone to check it out. And we just did an update to our FTUE to really work on our D1 retention. And when you experience this game, you will see a big cinematic that kind of welcomes the player into the game. Very high stakes, and it's a really good experience. And then right after that, we show the game board and have them interact with it. Not getting too heavy into the mechanics just yet, but just kind of interesting interaction with the game. And so they experience some interaction, and then we show them another big cinematic. And because of the interaction they just had, they're a little more engaged. Maybe they're going to interact again. And then after that cinematic, we actually, in that fourth screen at the bottom there, we actually showed them the game board again for a second, and then we kind of take them into another cinematic, kind of a little like trick. They thought they were going to about to touch the screen, and we go into another cinematic, and then something happens. I won't spoil it too much. I encourage everyone to play the game. But it's an interesting sequence of events there that keeps the player engaged throughout this this initial part of the FTUE. So equally as important, I think all these parts are important. It's hard to weight what's more important than the other, but another important part of the FTUE is teaching the core game loop to the player. So once the player is engaged, one of the most important things to teach the player is the core game loop. I'm sure we all know what a core game loop is, but it's important that your FTUE has this loop in it and not something different, not other like different loops, but definitely your core game loop. Whether it's consciously or subconsciously, the player at the early stage is trying to understand what the motivation is in this game. And it's something they want to return to and keep playing. So I write consciously and subconsciously. So a lot of us will play these games knowing like, okay, what is this game about? I want to know what the loop is. But a lot of players that don't really know what a core game loop is, they're just experiencing it. And it's very important to show them what the game is up front and walk them through that loop a couple of times. And so they have the correct expectations for the game as well, and they get used to it. So once you get hands off, they'll start experiencing the loop that you just kind of walked them through a few times and start enjoying it. So the examples I have here is from a game I worked at Jam City called World War Doe. So the player should be walked through the loop once or twice before the FTUE becomes hands off. I write once or twice, but it could be 3 times. It could be quite a bit. I've been playing games recently that they do it quite a bit in the first time user experience. So the example above, you get an intro cinematic, then you get into the first level, just throwing them into the level, teaching them some game mechanics, and after that, going to the gacha, getting a new hero or a new card. Experiencing the gacha mechanic, and then getting thrown right back into the battle, and then right back into the gacha, and that gacha then increasing your power up. So you're experiencing the battling, you're experiencing the gacha, and you're experiencing power up every time, and just walking them through that a few times. And it's gonna be the bread and butter, and that's how we make money in the gacha. So yeah, it's just important. I was playing like Empires and Puzzles, and yeah, they throw you into the gacha like 3 or 4 times right in the first 10 minutes, and it's good because, especially like, I mean, it also translates to monetization because we're teaching them the hard currency costs, and in the beginning the timers are low and the costs are either free or 1 or something very cheap, but they'll start getting into that loop, and then once they the timers get bigger and the costs get bigger, they'll just still be engaged into that loop. So optimization, also very important, and it relates to adaptability, increasing the early game KPIs, which we look at a couple different KPIs when looking at the FTUE. So one important thing is funnels and making sure your game can track them. So monitoring the player's funnel to see when the majority of players stay engaged or drop off is a great way to identify strengths and weaknesses for your FTUE. So yeah, monitoring and making sure you have them on different steps, and you can see when players churn, and if players churn a significant amount, then you can go into that part of the FTUE and kind of see what you're doing wrong and kind of explore that. So once a FTUE funnel is established, it becomes easy to see where they churn. So an example, and mana monsters. The data at the bottom here is just representations, not the actual data, but it was something similar to this. We saw a drop off at a certain node in the first session, and looking into that, it was the battle where we showed battle boosters to the player, and so seeing a significant drop off, we went to look at that a little bit more. And a couple of things that we saw we could improve was the icon of the battle boosters was was not as clear. Once you open the battle boosters, the UI for it showed all the battle boosters, like not just the early ones, not the ones that you're about to use, but kind of like everything available to the player. And so this was just overwhelming to the player, just seeing too much too soon, and just just a little bit of overload on them. So we redesigned it. We we redesigned the icon of the boosters, made it much more clear. We reduced the initial battle boosters to just 3 basic ones, and then we took the rest of the battle boosters to make sure they were available throughout the game through feature nodes and kind of pacing them in through the player's journey as you go along later on. And then we saw our funnel become better. It was more of a consistent numbers than that kind of a steep drop off there. So that was very important. So another way of making sure your FTUE is optimized playtesting. There are a lot of third-party companies out there that help with this. We've been using Playtest Cloud. They've been very helpful. They provide recordings of players going through the initial first 30 minutes of the game and seeing their reactions. All the reactions are recorded. They rate the game, what they think, and they're very vocal about what they think of the game and steps of it. They kind of speak out loud and encourage to, and it helps a lot. And this is a great way to spot parts of your FTUE that might be causing friction, or players might not be getting certain things. I know some companies they do their testing in-house. They'll do test groups, and that works out too. But it's important, you can play testing. You can give your game to your friends, your family. It doesn't have to be a play testing company, but yeah, just making sure you have other eyes on it, because sometimes you kind of become a little blind to certain spots where you know the game so well that you don't see the friction points on the first time user experience, but the new perspective will really help with that. So in this example, in Grimguard Tactics, we had a mechanic. To use your ability, you had to drag the ability card onto the target. Something that we thought was easy enough. You just take the card and drag it onto the target. We even had a little indicator on your target. Just drag it here. So we saw in playtesting that this wasn't as clear to players, even being told to do it. It wasn't as clear as players to experience it. They were kept missing it. They were doing other things, and so we thought that was a friction point. So we took it a step further, and this is kind of a step further. We made sure that the instructional text is on there. Drag your ability card onto the target. We silhouetted everything on the screen. We did a special animated highlight on the target. We have a ghosted hand going from the target to the target over and over again, and players still didn't get it. So with Playtest Cloud, you can see your taps and seeing where they're dragging. And I saw people tapping the card. I saw players dragging the hero's face. I'm gonna use the pointer because I have it. Hold on. I see the players dragging the player's face to the target this way, even though this is going this way. Yeah, it's interesting. So we went a step further. And we just redesigned that part of the game, the ability dragging. And now it's a tap. And so as a team, we redesigned it to tap and the tap targets, and we tested it in the house. And yeah, it feels really good. So it kind of shaped this playtesting pretty much shaped a lot of the game, but. Yeah, but it increased the first time user experience now that there's a less of a friction point, because yeah, we're so fickle, our attention is so short, and any little bump in the road is really going to kind of deter us from continuing. So it's really important to do that. And that is it. Kind of ran through it a little bit fast, but I'd love to open up the QA if there's any questions. I'd love to answer. I believe there's an app too. I don't know if you're going to check the app, but.
Yeah, we definitely have two questions on the app. First one, apart from D1, are there any other metrics that you keep an eye out on to evaluate the FTUE?
Yeah, so like this translates to D3 as well. D1 is definitely the primary one, but I guess that the funnel is something that we really look at because it doesn't really correlate to D1, but just looking at where players churn is going to be very important. So you can kind of like narrow it down to those specific spots. So yeah, I would say that looking exactly where they churn if you have funnel set up. And then D3 and D7 is going to be attributed to it too, but D1 is definitely going to be the biggest metric you can be looking at for this.
Yeah, another question is, what's your take on a long handheld FTUE versus a more contextual one with a short handheld phase?
So I believe the question is like if it's overly handheld as opposed to non-handheld. I prefer not being too handheld in my UI. Like I would like to walk them through the steps. Definitely make them walk through the steps and handhold them, but don't obstruct too much of the UI because once you let go, they're going to have to see where everything's at and kind of experience it by themselves. So it's kind of a mix. For the steps and mechanics, I think just go ahead and walk them through it. There's certain sections that you can have the ability to skip, like cutscenes. It's great to have cutscenes in games and story. Players sometimes just want to know they're there and have an ability to skip them. Like if they'll see a cutscene, okay, cool, this game has story. They'll skip it and they'll feel kind of fulfilled, like this game has depth, even not even getting into the story. So have sections like that where you can skip. If it's I would even encourage it, if it's a game that has a mechanic that's been around for a long time, if it's a match mechanic or something similar to that, you could even have a pop-up saying, are you familiar with match mechanics? If so, do you want to skip? And then it's like, yeah, I have no matching mechanic. Let me get past this part because there are going to be players like that have been, match mechanics, and a lot of our mechanics in our free-to-play games have been around for a long time. So, but definitely anything that's like unique to your game, yeah, absolutely, walk them through it. Be very clear.
Yeah. And we still have 8 minutes left, so any question from the audience? Could you please raise your hand? Yeah, I can bring you the microphone.
The mic's coming.
In a tutorial level, how much would you say is too much information in just one level, I guess?
Yeah, so it definitely depends on. I would try to break it down into little pieces. If you have, I don't know, like different mechanics, like for example, boosters. If you have different matching mechanics or like combo mechanics, I would not do that all at once. It's okay to have like 3 or 4 or even 5 like smaller levels where you teach one mechanic, like get them used to it. Because we've seen when we do overload the player, even when you sometimes you feel like it's not too much, sometimes it is too much for the player. But yeah, so just really try to break it down into little pieces. Don't try to do too much, explain too much too fast to get past the tutorial. It's totally fine to design it so the level has a little bit of teaching and tutorial where it's not like annoying, and then do like that again with another little one that's not too annoying, and then I think that's the best way to go about it. Thank you.
Yeah, one more question online. Do you have any experience with tabletop games and how FTUI affects them?
I don't, no. I don't, unfortunately, no. Yeah. But it's interesting. I definitely want to get into that. Yeah.
And do you frequently adapt your FTUE for different player profiles? If so, how do you measure the profiles?
I don't. So it was a question doing FTUEs for different player profiles?
Yeah.
I don't, but I did go to a talk, yesterday with a marketing talk, and they were talking about a lot of profiles. Super interesting, and it has been making me think about that. Having different player profiles where we kind of geared different things to and test. So something I'm going to go back and work on. I'm actually I just want to say I'm very impressed with the talks here. It's been great so far going to all these different talks and listen to everyone speak. I've been having a good time.
Yeah. The final question: do you think the approach for making the FTUE is the same for how we should handle players returning to the game after not playing for a bit?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I've seen games do that too. Having a FTUE for returning players to give them a refresher course, I think is an absolute great idea. I would absolutely encourage that as well. Not sure how much time you would set for that, but definitely kind of to recap them on a quick recap of what the mechanics are, and maybe even add on by the way, this has been added as well. I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
And there's one more question coming up. Do you think that tapping and dragging as a mechanic is something to avoid based on your earlier example?
I would say not to avoid it, but just look at the steps of it. So if the drag has multiple steps, so there's a drag and then there's a confirm, and then maybe there's another toggle step, I would say it's too much. I would try to reduce the amount of steps. So for example, in the game called Raven Guard, right now you can from the player to the enemy to attack, you can just swipe from player to enemy, and then that's it. So that's actually the reduced steps there. You could do it from tapping also, and maybe that's additional steps. So I would say look at your game and the ease for the player and how they interact with it, and how they understand that it's going to play a big role. But I wouldn't say either or is the best way. I think it depends on your game and how you execute it. But less points of friction, the better.
Yeah. And one more question. Thoughts on starters packages and other IAPS, I don't know what says, IAPS, as part of the first session experience?
Sure. IAPs, and what was the first one?
Thoughts on starters packages and other IAPS.
Packs. I would avoid too much starter, giving them a bundle right away. I kind of leave that until after the FTUE once they're kind of got the loop. But one thing I would encourage doing, something Empires and Puzzle does well, is encourage them to work in that game loop that benefits the monetization. So in Empires and Puzzles, they make you fast forward a building for a coin, right? And it seems very pain-free. One coin, sure. So they go and they do that one coin, and another one coin, and then another one coin, and then the 2 coins, and it kind of builds up. And then you kind of see later on that the coins in that game are extremely valuable, and you want I want to buy those coins now. But the game that you taught them, they're really encouraged to use your hard currency, because a lot of times players will play these games with their hard currency and they'll kind of hoard it and not really want to use it. No, I don't want to use this. This is my money. I don't want to do this. I want to save it. But yeah, if you use that part of the loop where you use the 1 coin, I would even encourage that over I would say free. Have them be pain free to do that, and I think it'll benefit your monetization. In ways that I think the question was getting at.
Yeah, we don't have any question online. So one more question from the audience.
Any other questions? Super clear? Awesome.
Yeah, and the time is...
Oh, there's one question. I actually enjoy the questions. This is good.
Yep. So for a tutorial level, would you say it's a better idea to include it in a story, or do you think it's a good idea to be able to revisit the level as a standalone?
Right. Okay. So the question. So is it a good idea to revisit a tutorial level? Was that? Right. Yeah, if it's not. Yeah, I would. It's a hard one. I think including tutorials in the story is good. I didn't think they should be revisited by the player at all, or like maybe like they'll try to grind them or whatever. Sometimes I see tutorial levels kind of like checkmarked and you can't go back to them. So yeah, I would kind of, yeah, once the player learns that mechanic, because these tutorial levels should be very, very easy, very like a couple steps, and not replay it again. So I hope that answered the question. That's it.